The crystal champagne flute exploded against the marble floor of the Meridian Hotel ballroom, sending shards across the polished surface like scattered diamonds. The sound cut through the elegant chatter of Manhattan's elite like a gunshot, freezing conversations mid-sentence and turning hundreds of designer-clad guests toward the source of the disturbance. Jade Morrison stood in the center of the opulent room, her second-hand black dress a stark contrast to the sea of couture surrounding her. Her dark hair, pulled back in a simple bun, had come loose during her dramatic entrance, and now fell in waves around her shoulders as she faced the man she'd spent 5 years hunting. Victor Ashworth turned slowly from his conversation with the mayor, his steel-gray eyes finding hers across the crowd. Even from 30 feet away, Jade could see the confusion flickering across his perfectly sculpted features. He didn't recognize her. Of course he didn't. Why would someone like Victor Ashworth remember the sister of a nobody from Brooklyn? You killed my brother. Jade's voice carried across the suddenly silent ballroom, each word sharp as the glass at her feet. And you don't even remember his name. Security guards began moving through the crowd, but Victor raised a hand, stopping them. His jaw tightened as he studied her face, searching for recognition that she knew wouldn't come easily. The powerful and wealthy didn't waste memory on the casualties of their careless lives. I think there's been a mistake, Victor said, his voice calm and controlled even as blood trickled from a small cut on his cheek where a shard had grazed him. I don't know who you are. Jade laughed, but there was no humor in it. Danny Morrison. Ring a bell? Brown hair, green eyes, 19. Years old when your friends decided he'd make good entertainment at your little fraternity reunion 5 years ago. Something shifted in Victor's expression. A flicker of memory, perhaps, or maybe just annoyance at being challenged so publicly. Around them, smartphones had appeared like magic, capturing every moment of what would undoubtedly become tomorrow's scandal. You need to leave, Victor said, stepping closer. Before you do something you'll regret. Regret? Jade's voice cracked with emotion she'd tried so hard to suppress. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. The security guards were closing in now, their hands moving to their radios. Jade could feel the walls of privilege and power forming around Victor like a fortress, protecting him just as they always had. Just as they had the night Danny died. But she'd come too far to be stopped by hired muscle and intimidation. She'd sacrificed everything for this moment. Her art career, her relationships, her peace of mind. For 5 years, she'd worked 3 jobs to save money, studied Victor's patterns, infiltrated his world through careful networking and forged credentials. Danny Morrison, she repeated, louder this time. He worshipped you. Thought you were everything he wanted to be when he grew up. Rich, powerful, untouchable. Victor's face had gone pale, and Jade knew she'd found her mark. He was beginning to remember, and the guilt she saw creeping into his eyes was the first payment on the debt she'd come to collect. That's enough, he said quietly, gesturing to security. Escort her out. But Jade wasn't finished. As the guards reached for her arms, she smiled, a cold, predatory expression that made Victor take an involuntary step back. This isn't over. Mr. Ashworth, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's perfect acoustics. This is just the beginning. As the security guards led her away, Jade caught Victor's reflection in the ballroom's mirrored walls. He looked haunted, and she felt the first flicker of satisfaction she'd experienced in 5 long years. Victor's penthouse office overlooked Central Park, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city he'd been born to rule. But as he sat across from Jade Morrison in his private study 3 hours after the gala incident, the familiar view felt like a prison. How did you get past my security? He asked, pouring himself a scotch with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Jade sat perfectly still in the leather chair across from his desk, her evening dress replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. She looked younger now, more vulnerable. But Victor wasn't fooled. He'd seen the predator behind her eyes at the hotel. Money talks, even to loyal employees, she said simply. Amazing what people will do for the right price. What do you want? I want you to remember Danny Morrison. Her voice was steady, but Victor caught the slight catch when she said her brother's name. I want you to remember the night you and your prep school friends decided to relive your glory days. Victor closed his eyes, and the memory came flooding back unbidden. The private club upstate, the reunion of his old fraternity brothers, too much alcohol and too much testosterone. And Danny, bright-eyed Danny Morrison, who'd somehow talked his way into their exclusive circle. The hazing, Victor said quietly. The torture, Jade corrected. They called it initiation, but what they did to Danny was systematic torture. And you watched. Victor's jaw clenched. I tried to stop them. Not hard enough. Jade leaned forward, her dark eyes blazing. Not when they made him drink until he could barely stand. Not when they locked him outside in 30-degree weather wearing nothing but underwear. Not when Raymond Pike decided to take things further. The name hit Victor like a physical blow. Raymond Pike, his former best friend, now a successful hedge fund manager with political ambitions, the man who'd always pushed boundaries, who'd never learned when to stop. Danny died of hypothermia and alcohol poisoning, Jade continued, her voice clinical now, detached. Alone in the woods behind that club while you all went inside to sleep off your fun. Victor set down his glass with a sharp click. The police investigated. It was ruled an accident. Jade smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression he'd ever seen. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, spreading photographs across his mahogany desk. Bank records, email printouts, official documents bearing the Ashworth Industries letterhead. Your father's been embezzling from the company pension fund for 12 years, she said conversationally. These are the records that prove it. $15 million stolen from the retirement accounts of your employees. Victor stared at the documents, his world tilting sideways. That's impossible, is it? Look at the dates. Look at the account numbers. Look at your father's signature authorizing the transfers. Jade's voice remained calm, matter of fact. I have security footage too. Your father accessing the accounts, moving the money, destroying evidence. She pulled out her phone and showed him a video file. Victor watched in horror as his father, the man he'd admired his entire life, methodically transferred funds from employee retirement accounts into offshore holdings. How did you get this? I've spent 5 years learning everything about your family, Victor. Every secret, every weakness, every lie. Jade collected the photographs with methodical precision. I know about your mother's gambling addiction, your sister's eating disorder, your own struggles with anxiety after Danny's death. Victor looked up sharply. You know about that? I know you started seeing a therapist. I know you've donated anonymously to anti-hazing organizations. I know you've carried guilt about Danny for 5 years. Her expression softened slightly, then hardened again. But guilt without action is worthless. What do you want? Victor asked again, though he dreaded the answer. Jade stood and moved, to the window, looking out at the city lights. I want you to feel what Danny felt that night. Helpless, alone, at the mercy of people who hold all the power while you have none. She turned back to him, and Victor saw something deadly in her eyes. I want you to marry me. The words hit him like a physical blow. What? 1 year. A real marriage, not some arrangement for appearances. I want access to your world, your connections, your resources. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. And then I want to watch you lose everything, just like Danny did. Part 3, The Devil's Contract. The small chapel in Brooklyn smelled of old wood and fading flowers. Minister Collins, A thin man in his 70s who'd agreed to perform the ceremony for an enormous cash payment cleared his throat nervously as he looked between the bride and groom. Jade wore a simple white dress she'd bought off the rack that morning. No veil, no flowers, no guests, just a contract being sealed in the eyes of God and the state of New York. Victor stood beside her in a charcoal suit, his face a mask of resignation. "Dearly beloved," Minister Collins began, his voice echoing in the empty chapel, "we are gathered here today." But Victor wasn't listening to the familiar words. He was thinking about the conversation they'd had in his penthouse the night before, after Jade had delivered her ultimatum. "If I refuse," he'd asked, "then your father goes to prison tomorrow. Your company collapses. 15,000 families lose their retirement savings because of choices your family made." She'd moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "You have until midnight to decide." He'd called her at 11:47 p.m. "Do you, Victor Ashworth, take Jade Morrison to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Minister Collins asked. Victor looked at Jade, this stranger who held his family's fate in her hands. Her dark eyes were unreadable, but he caught something there, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even regret. "I do," he said, the words tasting like ashes. "And do you, Jade Morrison, take Victor Ashworth to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Jade hesitated for just a moment. In that pause, Victor glimpsed the frightened girl beneath the predator's mask. Then it was gone. "I do. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Their kiss was perfunctory, cold as winter rain. A business transaction sealed with lips that barely touched. When they broke apart, Jade's hand went unconsciously to the simple gold band on her finger, as if testing its weight. Afterward, in the back of Victor's car driving through Brooklyn, they sat in silence. The partition between them and the driver was raised, but neither seemed inclined to speak. The city passed by outside the tinted windows, Jade's world giving way to Victor's as they headed toward Manhattan. "Having second thoughts?" Victor asked quietly as they crossed the bridge. Jade turned from the window. "About destroying you?" "Never." But her voice lacked the conviction it had held the night before, and Victor noticed. They established the rules of their arrangement that first night in the penthouse. Jade took the guest room down the hall from Victor's master suite. They would appear together at public events, play the part of newlyweds for the cameras and gossip columns. Privately, they would maintain separate lives. "I want access to your business dealings," Jade said as they stood in Victor's home office, drawing up their informal contract. "Your social circle, your financial records, everything." Victor nodded. He'd already given her access to his accounts, his calendar, his private correspondence. "What else?" "I want to understand how your world works, how people like you make decisions that affect people like Danny." Her voice was clinical, but Victor caught the pain underneath. "I want to know exactly what kind of man I married." Over the following weeks, they fell into a strange routine. Jade moved through Victor's world like an anthropologist studying an alien species. She attended charity galas and business dinners, watched board meetings and private negotiations. She was learning, Victor realized, studying the mechanisms of power and privilege. At night, they would return to the penthouse and retreat to opposite ends of the apartment. But sometimes, Victor would find Jade in his study, going through his files with methodical precision. She was building a case against him, gathering evidence for whatever final destruction she planned. "Find anything interesting?" he asked one evening, discovering her at his desk with a stack of financial documents. Jade looked up, and for a moment, her mask slipped. She looked tired, older than her 26 years, just trying to understand how someone can steal $15 million from their own employees and sleep at night. "My father's crimes aren't mine," Victor said quietly. "Aren't they? You're heir to the company. You'll inherit everything he built on stolen money." Jade set down the papers. "That makes you complicit." Victor moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "What would you have me do?" Destroy thousands of jobs to satisfy your need for justice? I'd have you do what's right. And what's that exactly? Turn my father in? Watch him die in prison? Let the company collapse and put 15,000 people out of work? Victor turned back to her. Your version of justice seems to involve a lot of collateral damage. Jade was quiet for a long moment. Danny was collateral damage too, and Victor had no answer for that. 2 months into their marriage of convenience, Jade discovered the first crack in her carefully constructed narrative of Victor as villain. She was alone in his study, going through financial records as had become her nightly routine, when she found the folder hidden in the bottom drawer of his desk. The label read DM Memorial Fund in Victor's precise handwriting. Inside were bank statements showing monthly donations to anti-hazing organizations, suicide prevention groups, and scholarships for underprivileged students, all made in Danny Morrison's name. The amounts were staggering, $50,000 a month for 5 years, totaling over $3 million. Jade's hands trembled as she flipped through the records. There were also newspaper clippings about Raymond Pike's arrest for securities, fraud, about new legislation targeting hazing in colleges, about Victor's own quiet advocacy work with victim support groups. At the bottom of the folder was a photograph she'd never seen before. Danny laughing at something off camera, his face bright with life and possibility. On the back, in Victor's handwriting, "I'm sorry I failed you. Find what you were looking for?" Jade spun around to find Victor standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. She quickly tried to close the folder, but he'd already seen what she'd discovered. "I wasn't looking for anything specific," she said, but the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Victor entered the room slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt. "The night Danny died, I was the one who found him first." The words hit Jade like ice water. "What?" "You arrived at the hospital about an hour after I did." Victor moved to the window, not looking at her. "I'd been calling to check on him for weeks after that night at the club. When he didn't answer that morning, I knew something was wrong." Jade felt like the world was shifting beneath her feet. "You never told me this. Because you needed someone to blame, and I deserved to be blamed." Victor's reflection in the dark window looked haunted. "I should have done more that night. Should have stopped Pike completely. Should have gotten Danny medical attention immediately instead of just driving him home." She stared at the financial records in her hands, trying to reconcile them with the image of the callous, rich boy she'd constructed in her mind. "Why didn't you tell me about the donations?" What would have been the point? Danny was still dead. My guilt and my money couldn't bring him back. Jade looked at the photograph of her brother, remembering how excited he'd been about getting invited to spend time with Victor's crowd. Danny had always been impressed by wealth and status, had dreamed of escaping their small Brooklyn apartment and their mother's night shift nursing job. "He called me the night before," she said quietly. "Said he'd made friends with some important people. Said they were going to help him get into business school." Victor's shoulders tensed. "Pike promised him that. Said if Danny proved himself worthy, they'd put in a good word with their connections. And proving himself meant surviving whatever they put him through." "I tried to stop it," Victor said, finally turning from the window. "I told them it was enough, that he'd had enough. But Pike said I was getting soft, that Danny needed to earn his place." Jade studied his face, looking for deception, but saw only pain and regret. "So you left him there?" "I drove him home, made sure he got inside safely. I thought—" Victor's voice broke slightly. "I thought he'd sleep it off. I thought he'd be okay." The photograph trembled in Jade's hands. All this time, she'd imagined Victor as the ringleader, the one who'd orchestrated Danny's humiliation and death. But the man standing before her wasn't a monster. He was someone as broken as she was, carrying his own burden of guilt and regret. "The embezzlement evidence," she whispered. "It's real, isn't it?" Victor nodded. Every dollar of it. And you're going to expose it, aren't you? Let my father go to prison. Let the company collapse. Jade looked down at the memorial fund records, at proof that Victor had been quietly trying to make amends for 5 years. She thought about the employees who would lose their jobs, the retirees who would lose their savings, the ripple effects of the justice she'd been so determined to deliver. "What if I don't want your destruction anymore?" she asked, surprising herself with the words. Victor's eyes widened. "Then what do you want?" For the first time in 5 years, Jade Morrison didn't know the answer to that question. Outside, thunder rolled across Manhattan, and the first drops of rain began to fall against the penthouse windows. Part 5. When enemies' fall spring came to Manhattan with unexpected warmth, and Jade found herself standing on the penthouse terrace, watching the city wake up below. 3 months had passed since her discovery of Victor's secret memorial fund, and the documents that could destroy the Ashworth family remained locked in his safe, unused. She was falling in love with her husband. The realization should have terrified her, but instead, it felt like coming alive after years of existing in a state of suspended animation. Victor had shown her parts of the city she'd never seen. Hidden gardens, private museums, rooftop restaurants where they were the only diners who mattered. More importantly, he'd shown her who he really was beneath the privilege and power. He was in the kitchen now, making coffee and humming something under his breath, his dark hair messy from sleep. When he looked up and smiled at her through the glass doors, Jade felt her heart stop. She was in love with the man she'd married to destroy. That was when her phone rang. "Hello, Mrs. Ashworth." The voice was smooth, cultured, and instantly recognizable from news interviews and society pages. Raymond Pike. Jade's blood turned to ice. "How did you get this number?" "I make it my business to know things about my old friends, especially when they make such interesting marriage choices." Pike's laugh was cold. "Imagine my surprise when I discovered Victor had married Danny Morrison's sister." Through the glass, Jade saw Victor look up sharply at her expression. She stepped further out onto the terrace, away from his concerned gaze. "What do you want?" "I want to congratulate you, of course. It's quite brilliant, really. Marry into the family, gain their trust, then destroy them from within. I assume you have some delicious evidence hidden away?" Jade's grip tightened on the phone. "You're wrong." "Am I?" "Because I have it on good authority that you've been investigating dear Victor's family finances. Finding some interesting irregularities, perhaps?" Pike's voice turned predatory. "Here's what's going to happen, my dear. You're going to share whatever you've found with me, or I'm going to make sure the whole world knows exactly how Danny Morrison really died. Everyone already knows how he died." "No. They know the sanitized version, accidental death during a college reunion. But they don't know about the video." Jade's world tilted. "What video?" "The one I took that night, of course. Such a shame, Victor." "Never told you about it. Danny begging for mercy, crying for his sister, promising to do anything if we'd just let him go home." Pike's voice was silk wrapped around poison. "I wonder what the Morrison family would think if they knew their precious daughter had fallen in love with one of the men who tortured their son." The phone slipped from Jade's numb fingers, clattering onto the terrace floor. Victor burst through the doors, gathering her into his arms as she collapsed against him. "What happened? Who was that?" "Pike," she whispered. "He has a video of that night." Victor went completely still. "That's impossible. There was no video." "He says there was. He says Danny was begging, crying." Jade pulled back to look at Victor's face. "Did you know?" "No." Victor's eyes blazed with fury. "I swear to you, Jade, I had no idea Pike had recorded anything." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But doubt crept in like poison, whispering all her old fears and suspicions. "He wants the embezzlement evidence," she said. He wants me to give him the documents about your father. Victor's jaw clenched. What did you tell him? Nothing. I hung up. Jade moved away from him, needing space to think. But he'll call back. And if I don't give him what he wants, he'll release the video. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of Pike's threat settling between them like a physical presence. There's something else, Jade said quietly. He knew about us, about our marriage, about why I really married you. Someone's been feeding him information. Victor's face went pale. Someone in my organization, or someone who's been watching us both. Jade turned to face him. Victor, what if this whole thing was orchestrated? What if Pike wanted us to find each other? Wanted us to fall into this situation? Before Victor could answer, Jade's phone rang again. This time, Victor picked it up. Pike. Victor, how lovely to hear from you. I trust your lovely wife has shared my proposal? Stay away from her. Now, old friend. No need for hostility. I'm simply offering Mrs. Ashworth a business proposition. The evidence of your father's embezzlement in exchange for keeping certain embarrassing videos private. Victor's grip on the phone tightened. You bastard. Such language. Surely your wife deserves to know the truth about what happened to her brother, about how he screamed your name begging you to help him. The phone creaked in Victor's hand. I'll destroy you.